Hello again from New York. I'm Aaron Brown on a beautiful September afternoon in the city and a horrible task at hand. The search and rescue teams continue to do their difficult, tedious, meticulous work down at the crash scene, and then the heavy construction work, dismantling buildings that are a danger to them and to the area. Preparations going on for the stock exchange to open on Monday morning at 9:30. Tests are being run there, and so far all the tests are going well. At the armory where the families of the missing have gathered, DNA samples are now being taken to help identify the remains as they are found at the site. That's the scene in New York today. Just to put a button on a piece of information we told you about earlier, if I may, this morning at Boston's Logan Airport. Logan will always have an infamous place in this tragedy. A man was pulled off a Delta Airlines flight headed for Atlanta because officials said he was behaving in a rowdy and suspicious way. The man, described as vaguely Arab-looking, kept changing seats in first class. Police have now investigated that situation and have determined the reason the man kept changing seats in first class is he wanted a better seat. He's been released. It gives you an idea of how edgy things are after this extraordinary tragedy. To Washington, Judy, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Aaron. You're right. A lot of us are jumpy right now, and for many different reasons. Some of them good ones and some of them not so good. Well, President Bush used words today that some of us thought we might not hear in a long time, and that is, he said the United States is at war. Before he met with his national security team this morning at Camp David, the president told reporters Osama bin Laden is, quote, the prime suspect behind Tuesday's attacks, and he advised the men and women in the U.S. military to, quote, get ready.
They will try to hide. They will try to avoid the United States and our allies, but we're not going to let them. They run to the hills. They find holes to get in, and we will do whatever it takes to smoke them out and get them running, and we'll get them.
Meantime, in New York today, 3 fire department officials were laid to rest in the first of what are sure to be many similar scenes across the region. An estimated 300 firefighters are among the almost 5,000 people still missing in the rubble of the World Trade Center. Here in Washington at the Pentagon, officials said today they have recovered more bodies from that building's damaged area, but workers in other parts of the Pentagon are moving forward with their duties. When asked if U.S. ground troops might be part of a military response, a White House spokesman said today, quote, nothing has been ruled out. On a related note from overseas, the Pakistani government today pledged to, quote, fully cooperate with the United States in its war effort against terrorism. More on those developments ahead. We'll also take a look at the life of one of the suspected hijackers and how authorities believe that he spent the last year preparing for Tuesday's attack. And we'll take a look ahead at the reopening of the markets on Monday and what lies ahead for the American economy. Aaron?
Judy, thanks. Here in this city, as we prepare for Wall Street's reopening on Monday morning, there is just a block and a half away the relief effort that goes on. Martin Savage has been down there for 3 days now. He is down there still. Marty, good afternoon.
Good afternoon to you, Aaron. This has been another all-out effort day on the part of rescuers and those trying to get in to see if there are any survivors to be found in the rubble. You can see that rubble in the background there. Yeah, as many times as I have looked at that, you still find your eyes being drawn back once more. Really what you're looking at there for the most part is the remains of building number 7. That is not one of the high-rises, it's one of the lower levels that was part of the complex. And then, of course, you can see it's still smoldering, still burning, and some firefighters say it will be smoldering and burning like that for a long, long time to come. We were talking with people who have been working as rescuers inside there. A lot of them are construction people. And what we have noted is that there has been a shift in the approach here to the rescue effort, turning it over more to the professionals, that is, those who are used to working with heavy equipment, those that have the expertise with steel, specifically cutting that steel, getting access for the rescue teams to get deeper inside of the debris pile. And one of the things that one of the gentlemen told us about was the fact that there is word that there are voids there, that they have heard that there are indications from people who have managed to climb down that there are certain areas that almost appear untouched. And almost every individual that you talk to that is part of the rescue team, part of the volunteer effort, say they believe quite strongly that hope is still very strong. They say that there are a lot of opportunities that we have seen historically in the past from other disasters of collapses or earthquakes that people can survive. There were stores there, so there may possibly be access for food and water, and they are not ready to turn out the lamp of hope in their efforts. Then we've also been watching the thousands of people that have been attempting to get back into their homes. There are many apartments that are in this area that is an exclusionary zone right now. There were estimates of about 25,000 people, some believe it's a lot higher, that have been made homeless because they cannot get back to their apartments. People today lining up, standing in long lines, long waits for the opportunity to go back to their apartments. They are escorted, every one of them, and given just 10 minutes to grab whatever it is in their life they left behind that they must take away and may not be able to get back to for quite some time. And also in this area has been the effort to work on getting Wall Street back online. That is a separate issue, but it's also a vital one for the economy and getting things back to normal, which is something that is stressed so much on the part of the president and the leaders of New York City. That ongoing effort is also happening, but the most important one is the one taking place back there, and you can see perhaps in the distance the streams of water still being still being poured on the flames, still being poured on the smoke, some 5 days after New York City and all of us changed quite a bit. Aaron?
Martin, thanks. Martin Savage down on the scene. One of the reasons that people aren't giving up hope is that while all the focus with the Trade Center towers has been up, there's 6 or 7 levels below ground that people could be in, and that's where the most hope is. That's where the shops were. There's some food there, water there, so it's possible, and that's why people aren't giving up. People certainly aren't giving up hope at the Armory. These are the families of the missing, though there's, in fact, rather distressing scenes there being played out today. As this all moves to the next step, I guess. Elizabeth Cohen has been watching that, joins us again from the Armory. Elizabeth?
Aaron, I'm here at Ground Zero for the emotional devastation here in New York City. And behind me, as you can hear and possibly see now, is a gospel choir that's been coming to give people strength. Somebody to lean on, just might have a problem that you understand. We all need somebody to lean on me. When you're not strong, I'll be your friend. I'll help you carry on, for it won't be long till I'm gonna need somebody to lean on. Call me right there. Call me, 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 I believe I can touch the sky. In this group of people singing are just ordinary citizens who've been so horrified by what's happened. Also, I see some Salvation Army workers who are just in tears. They must have been through an incredible amount in the past couple of days. They've been bringing food and water, counseling people. I also see some people in the back who have the posters that people have been giving out and hanging up all over the city. Again, in this group are people who have lost loved ones. There are just ordinary citizens who came down to share their sadness. This has become just a natural gathering place, this corner of East 26 in Lexington. I also see several aid workers and counselors. You can imagine the stress that they have been through. They're now asking for requests from the crowd. I heard God Bless America. I heard Amazing Grace. But again, back to these counselors, I see several of them in the crowd. You can imagine in the Armory, they've had more than 3,000 people come in there. And you can imagine counseling person after person after person. Let's listen to Amazing Grace. This is just one of the many spontaneous shows of support for people who have been through so much in these horrible events. There are so many others. I'll tell you about one. Down the street, there is a bank of cabs that are lining up to take families to hospitals, to wherever they need to go to look for their loved ones. And it is very touching the way that New Yorkers have really come together. I'll give you another example. My producer, Miriam Falco, took a cab here from the hotel this morning, and when he heard why she was here, that she was a journalist covering this, he didn't charge her, wouldn't take any money. There are volunteers that have been handing out food. The volunteers that have been handing out food, everything that they've been doing has been so incredible. Aaron?
Elizabeth, I'll tell you something. This is a great town. New York, I think people around the country, many have a kind of jaundiced view of New York, and perhaps New Yorkers have a kind of jaundiced view of the rest of the country. But to watch how New Yorkers have responded, this is a tough town, and it does not like to be bullied. And so New Yorkers have responded with unusual, I won't say uncharacteristic, but a stunning generosity and compassion to their fellows. I heard a story coming in today. A guy came up to me as I was coming in the building and said, saw the most incredible thing. There's a guy over there in a wheelchair. He's a double amputee, and he's kind of zipping around in his wheelchair delivering sandwiches to the volunteers and the people who are working. It's I think our view, the country's view of New York, may change in all of this. Bill Hemmer knows a fair amount about the volunteers who have been flooding in and the efforts they are making, and on the other side of that, what still needs to be done. Bill joins us now from the Javits Center, the major convention center in town. Bill.
Aaron, hello again from down on street level along 11th Avenue on Manhattan's west side. Two things strike you throughout the day here. One is the continued desperation along with the hope, and the other is the generosity. Let me show you the desperation. On so many street corners, we have seen signs for the missing, people posting them in numerous locations throughout Manhattan, trying to hold on to the possibility ultimately that their loved ones, their fathers, their mothers, their sisters, their brothers may be found alive in the World Trade Center. The other thing is the generosity. We talked about the enormous outpouring. The small things strike us too, Aaron. On this street corner here where the volunteers lined up, there are people here in Manhattan offering their apartment in case they need a place to sleep and a place to rest for the night here. We talked about the volunteers throughout the day today. We have one volunteer with us now. Keith is in from Boston. And Keith, you want to step up here a second? Thank you, Bill. You were at the site yesterday. You just got back again today. Give us an idea for what's happening down there and the level of progress.
Oh, progress. Slow going, I mean steady, but everybody's got the same motive there, and that's to find survivors. So, I mean, everybody's morale is good. They're going for what they can, you know? It is Saturday. The last survivor pulled out was Wednesday. 4 days ago. Which is true. When you're down there working, knowing that fact, what kind of feeling is generated there? Can't really explain it. I mean, all that, you just got to keep in your mind that what it would be like to be in that building, knowing there's people looking. That's what kept me going. I mean, if somebody's in there, there's got to be somebody alive, so you just got to keep going. I mean, will you come back tomorrow? Yeah, I'll be staying here. I mean, as many times as they'll send you in, you'll go. Many times as I can go out there. Many people throughout the day, Keith, have been coming up to us and making sure that we get the word out about what things are needed and what things are not needed. The one thing many people say that is needed is what you're wearing right here, this respirator. Respirators, yes. Tell us about why that is so useful down there in the site. Well, what they have down there for the majority is paper dust masks, which are for sanding or sand and drywall. We don't want those then. No. These clear out 99.97% of the microns that would be in asbestos or whatever, and there's a lot of asbestos down at the Trade Center. It was built with asbestos, so I mean that's a major issue. Keith, I am told though that these canisters here are replaceable, and that's what you need because they wear out over time, correct? Yeah, I mean you'll get a day out of this, out of one canister. So the canisters, the respirators, what else could you use down there? Flashlights, batteries, respirators. I'm told things like hats with lights, hard hats with lights, welding equipment, work boots, goggles. From what I've seen, they had a lot of work boots. The welding equipment's taken care of. I mean, hats with lights, that's a little more than you'd really. Okay. I mean, well, you would know. You could get a hat and a flashlight. I mean, Keith, thanks, and best of luck throughout the week. And quickly, we want to pass along throughout the day, Aaron. We've been talking about where people can send donations if indeed they want to give. We've been talking about Shea Stadium and Giant Stadium. We're now told at this time that they don't want any more donations at that point. What we just talked about, though, is what is needed. You can bring that here to the Javits Center. Also, they're saying they're starting to turn the corner now away from donations to the financial end of it. And they say if you want to give and want to give money, they're giving out 3 specific locations right now: the American Red Cross through the Disaster Relief Fund, the Salvation Army, and the United Way of New York City. You can address it specifically to the September 11th Fund. So those 3 things right now are starting to be pushed here on the streets of Manhattan. Aaron, back upstairs to you now.
Bill, thank you very much. Bill Hemmer at the Javits Center, not terribly far away from where we are. Judy Woodruff in Washington. Judy.
Aaron, as you know, Eileen O'Connor has been following the threads of the investigation after Tuesday's attacks, and Eileen joins us now with a major development. Eileen.
Well, it is very a disturbing development, really, Judy. U.S. officials are confirming that U.S. intelligence had two people, at least two people, on a watch list. They informed the FBI about Khalid al-Midhar and Salim al-Hamzi. Now, al-Hamzi lived with his brother Nawak al-Hamzi at a San Diego apartment. Al-Midhar was a frequent visitor at that apartment. Neighbors described them as quiet. They often swam in the pool. They would come and go, though, at times that were a little suspicious, but people didn't really think anything of them. Apparently, they were, though, on a watch list. And U.S. intelligence say that they did inform the FBI because al-Khalid had actually been captured on videotape in Malaysia, according to one source, meeting with a suspect in the bombing of the USS Cole. So all of these men associated with the bombing of the USS Cole. That, of course, has ties to Osama bin Laden. So these men, despite the fact that they were on this watch list, were living in San Diego, traveled, as my sources indicate, on to Phoenix. And one of them, then they met up with a man named Hani Hanjour, and he, we know, received flight training in Scottsdale, Arizona. We also know that these men purchased tickets on the Dulles flight. That is the flight that actually went into the Pentagon. So those people, two hijackers at least, that we know of, who actually went on the Pentagon flight, that Dulles flight that went into the Pentagon, were being watched before by U.S. intelligence, had told the FBI that these were people to watch because they were already associated with that bombing of the USS Cole. Judy?
Eileen, to be on a watch list means the FBI is suspicious, but they don't have enough evidence to do anything about it?
Well, they are suspicious, and they are to be monitoring their developments. But some reports say that some $50,000 worth of credit card receipts for airlines tickets were found in one of these residences or a hotel room that was used by them. So there was some suspicious things going on, and they met up with a man and actually lived with a man, Hani Hanjour, who was receiving flight training in the United States. So this is a bit suspicious if they were on a watch list and were being able to travel so freely. Judy?
Eileen, the question keeps arising. If so much information is now surfacing in the 2, 3, 4 days after Tuesday's attacks about these people, why wasn't it clearer before that these people could pose a terrible danger?
Well, a lot of people would say hindsight is 20/20. There's a lot of disparate pieces of information, and this is a very large country, and there are a lot of people. You know, the other thing, Judy, in tracking the threads of this investigation, what has been so frustrating for us, and what law enforcement officials say has been so frustrating for them, is that these men all use very similar names, very similar spellings. And they're also using cutouts, and that means that they're using people who actually died, the names of people who died. And so that makes things increasingly difficult. For instance, we know in this case that there were two men on that watch list, Khalid al-Midhar and Salim al-Namzi. Now, al-Hamzi had a brother, Nawak al-Hamzi. All of this very confusing, and it was Nawak al-Hamzi who actually rented the apartment. So it's only his name that shows up on the list. And you see, that's how they get around it.
All right, Eileen O'Connor, following the investigation, we can only imagine how much pressure there is right now on all these investigators at the FBI and elsewhere. Darren?
Judy, we heard Eileen there talk about the common links between many of the suspects in this case. You hear FBI investigators, also journalists trying to put together the picture of where these suspects spent their time and where they were and exactly what they're doing. With one of the suspects on board one of the doomed flights, that trail leads to Beirut, Lebanon, and that's where we find our Brent Sadler today. Brent, what kind of picture are you able to paint from Beirut?
Well, first of all, Darren, revelations that a 26-year-old Lebanese man is suspected by the United States Justice Department of piloting a jetliner which may have been sent to target the White House has shocked and disturbed his family here in Lebanon's eastern Bekaa Valley. Now, the man at the center of this is Ziad Jarrah, and he is alleged to be one of the hijackers on United Flight 93, which crashed in a field some 80 miles from Pittsburgh shortly after 3 other jets struck the World Trade Center and the Pentagon. Ziad Jarrah's family here in Lebanon say that his profile, as far as they know, does not fit that of an Islamic fundamentalist bent on terror. In fact, his family here say that Ziad Jarrah enjoyed going to nightclubs, drank alcohol, and shared his life, but was not married to a Turkish woman.
He never acted or talked in a way that you could have an understanding that he might be related to this. He has his girlfriend, he goes to nightclubs, he drinks sometimes. His way of life can't be related to these parts.
Now, Ziad Jarrah's life away from Beirut began in Germany 4 years ago when he began engineering studies by proud parents who actually paid for that training, those courses out there. Jarrah also went to the Hamburg Mechanical Technical Institute, where 2 other suspected hijackers were also studying, it's thought, at the same time. Around a year ago, Jarrah told his parents that he was in the United States taking part in a seminar organized by the Boeing Aircraft Corporation that was related, he said, to his studies. After that, Jarrah returned to Hamburg, receiving yet more help from his parents. Later, he told them that he was going to Florida, was in Florida, training to be a pilot. They assumed all was well. Jarrah's last call home here in Lebanon came just 2 days before the suicide attacks, when he thanked his ailing father for sending him yet more money. The only time that Jarrah's movements raised concern here in Lebanon was when his Turkish girlfriend told his family that she thought he may have gone to Afghanistan with friends when they had separated for several weeks. Now, that is not being confirmed by the family. They say they have no evidence that he went to Afghanistan, and the family here in Lebanon is saying that they are more than willing to cooperate with the international inquiry. Back to you, Darren.
Brent, one question for you here. If, in fact, the family doesn't believe or is in shock and denial over what their son is accused of doing, what, in fact, did they think he was doing? Just that he was a student at all these places they were paying for him to attend?
Well, you have to look at the background of the family here. They're very well-to-do, well-educated, obviously have finances. They're a well-known family in the Bekaa Valley area, Sunni family, and they were convinced, they tell me, that their relative, that Ziad Jarrah, was doing very well in life. They had nothing, they say, to confirm any suspicions that are being raised now. In fact, he was back here in February to attend surgical work for his father, who had some heart surgery. He was here in February, and his girlfriend, the Turkish woman I mentioned, was back here only in August, just a few weeks ago, attending a family wedding, which Jarrah said he was unable to attend, saying that he was too busy taking examinations. Darren.
Brent Sadler in Beirut. Brent, thank you very much. Now, that's just the picture of one of the many suspected hijackers on board those planes on Tuesday. Our Miles O'Brien is joining us now. He's been not only putting together the picture of some of the others, but even more interestingly, seeing how their paths cross and how their circles kind of connect.
Concentric circles, you might call them. 19 suspects in all were on board those 4 aircraft. Let's first of all talk about the person we were just talking about, Ziad Jarrah, and that reference to Hamburg that Brent Sadler mentioned. Let's go to Hamburg, where the technical institute there, the Harburg Technical Institute, was a place where Jarrah was, along with Mohammed Atta, who was on American Airlines Flight 11. That was the first aircraft to strike the World Trade Center. And Marwan al-Shihi, who was on United 175, the second one. So Hamburg's an important place. Now, we're not sure about any sort of Brussels connection, but Brussels is a place of interest today as this investigation continues. Police there arrested 4 people who are linked to an Islamic fundamentalist group. 2 of them remain in custody. They had weapons to be used in war. That is the charge there in Brussels, Belgium, specifically Uzis. And there was some indication that they were looking for American targets in Europe. This all raises the question that what we're seeing is perhaps just the beginning. Perhaps some of the plan was thwarted. Now let's get back to the United States and see what we've got going on in the investigation here. First of all, Texas. Important point in Texas. There were 2 men who were arrested, or I should say detained, by the Immigration and Naturalization Service, Mohammed Jawed Azmat and Ayub Ali Khan. They have been transported to New York for questioning. What is perhaps most ominous about them is they were carrying these box cutters, which many of the passengers who called on the cellular telephones before the crashes indicated the hijackers were armed with. And in addition to having the box cutters, they were on a flight Tuesday morning. It happened to be from Newark to San Antonio, I believe, or was it Dulles to San Antonio? Newark to San Antonio. The plane, however, was grounded in St. Louis when that whole FAA ground stop, that unprecedented ground stop, occurred. The question is, was that perhaps a thwarted opportunity? Florida is another place where a lot of these suspects come up. 12 of the 19 suspects have a link to a Florida aviation school of some kind. 4 of them in all: Flight Safety, Embry-Riddle, a place called Huffman, and a place on the West Coast in Vero Beach, Flight Safety, Embry-Riddle, and one other. I'm not remembering it right now. Pardon me for that. Now, let's go over to San Diego. That's another place where at least 3 of the suspects were known to have lived. Noak Al-Hamzi, American Airlines 77, that's the one that went into the Pentagon. Khalid Al-Midar, American 77, and Hani Hanjour, guess what? American 77. They all had links to San Diego. In addition, San Diego became a focus today as FBI agents went to a very well-known aviation education facility called the King Schools. They produce CD-ROMs for pilots, 40,000 of them a year, by far the largest in this field. The FBI searched their records to see if there were any matches. We're told there were. Quickly, in Pennsylvania, the cockpit voice recorder and flight data recorder have been recovered. At the Pentagon, the same thing. One of them severely damaged, the cockpit voice recorder damaged. Not sure how much information we'll be able to get out of that. That sort of brings us up to date. Also in New York, there was the arrest, which is perhaps bearing the lead a little bit, but this was the person who had the false pilot's license, who had been arrested at JFK Airport on Thursday. Police say, investigators say, he is a material witness to all of this. So it is a sweeping dragnet that is really a global dragnet at this point.
Global and across the country. I think that's one of the things that is just an extra sock in the stomach to so many people when you ask, where did these people come from, where they get, where they get their training, and you find out right here in this country. I think it just has people shocked and amazed.
And living here for quite some time.
Living here, making ties, making friends, getting to know Americans. It's yet another sock. Miles, thank you for that update, that information. And with that, we'll go back up to Washington, D.C. and Judy.
Well, Darren, it's perhaps because of information like what we're hearing from Miles that President Bush today used the strongest words he has used since Tuesday's terrorist attacks. The president advised the military today to, quote, get ready to do whatever it takes to win this war. For the first time, the president labeled Osama bin Laden the prime suspect behind what happened. President Bush and his national security team are at Camp David right now, considering their next moves, we are told. And that's where we find our White House correspondent, Kelly Wallace. Kelly?
Well, Judy, you are exactly right. You can certainly say this is the strongest rhetoric by President Bush since Tuesday's attacks. In addition to calling on everyone in uniform to get ready, the president also asking the American people to be patient for what he says will be a sweeping and effective campaign against terrorists and those who harbor them.
At the secluded presidential retreat in the Maryland mountains, President Bush huddles with his national security team and prepares the American people for war.
We're at war. There's been an act of war declared upon America by terrorists, and we will respond accordingly.
The president refuses to discuss military options, but for the first time, he specifically named suspected terrorist Osama bin Laden as a, quote, prime suspect behind Tuesday's terrorism spree. Bin Laden is believed to be hiding out in Afghanistan, with the ruling Taliban government providing him safe haven.
This act will not stand. We will find those who did it. We will smoke them out of their holes. We will get them running. And we'll bring him to justice.
When asked if those words mean President Bush is considering using ground troops to attack terrorists, aides say nothing has been ruled out. But winning this so-called war and finding the elusive bin Laden won't be easy, says a former Clinton administration official.
We're not fighting a military, we're not fighting an organized power, but we're fighting a very diffuse and shadowy organization that has links in many different parts of the world.
Knowing Americans are hungry for swift retaliation, the president uses his radio address to say a sweeping response will come in time.
You will be asked for your patience, for the conflict will not be short. You will be asked for resolve, for the conflict will not be easy. You will be asked for your strength, because the course to victory may be long.
And aides say President Bush has gained strength from his meeting Friday with more than 200 family members with loved ones still missing, believing his job is to turn their sorrow into something positive for future generations.
And while the American people are overwhelmingly supportive of a military response, keeping that support up will be another big challenge for the president, especially if a prolonged military attack results in some U.S. troops losing their lives. Judy?
All right, Kelly Wallace reporting from near Camp David, where the president is spending this weekend. And now I think we're back to Aaron.
Judy, thank you. Here in New York, funerals today for some of the firefighters who died have gone on. And down on the street, of course, the recovery effort continues. And about a block and a half away from there, on Wall Street today, they are beginning to check the systems out that will go into effect, presumably, all things go well, at 9:30 in the morning on Monday morning. And we'll be talking about that in just a moment or so, but we want to check down on the streets to see what is happening there. First, Richard Roth is down there. Richard?
Yes, Aaron, the search goes on here just a few blocks. The overview position here for CNN. One city official said the toll of those now missing, unaccounted for, has risen by about 200. It's gone up to about 4,972. Bodies of 2 firefighters were located underneath an old fire engine, they said, in front of the American Express building, kind of on the periphery of the main rubble area. Meanwhile, trucks continue to take thousands of tons of rubble out of the site. Instead of some of the noise of the vehicles, what you hear now are bullhorns from police security officials saying, please move back onto the sidewalk. This is because more New Yorkers, thousands on the east side of New York, have been allowed back, some for a short period of time, to get a look at their possessions and their apartment. One of those returning, the priority for John Solomon, was his pets.
I got the mice out.
So they survived for how many days?
Since Wednesday. I stuffed their tank full of food and 3 bottles of water, and they would never know there was a disaster.
Another person who was there, another woman, was given a little bit more time, Carla Bauer, and Carla Bauer returned to her apartment. She's been living in the area of the World Trade Center for about 20 years. And she says she wants to stay. She does not plan to move out.
The thing that I was the most fearful of when I came back in here was looking out this window. Because this was my view, and it was the World Trade and the Woolworth Building. I've been here since 1981, and I refuse to let anybody push me out of here.
And of course, Aaron, as you mentioned, the funerals are taking place. Mayor Giuliani was out on Long Island for the funeral for the fire chief of New York City, called it a very mournful, sorrowful day, but he believes that New York will show courage and the city will come out stronger for all of this. Aaron?
Richard, thank you. Thank you very much. As we mentioned, Monday morning at 9:30, after virtually an entire week of being shut down, the markets never opened on Tuesday, I don't believe. Wall Street, New York Stock Exchange, the Amex, the NASDAQ gets back to work. Greg Clarkin is here. I read somewhere, I think this is correct, that area around the street, Stock Exchange, is the largest user of telecommunications equipment in the world. And all of that's being checked out today is pretty much it, because it is the bread and butter of making the system work.
Exactly, Aaron. It's a vast telecommunications system, and this morning technicians at the NYSE as well as at the NASDAQ and the member firms are really going over the telecom systems, the voice and data systems, to make sure everything is intact and up and running for 9:30 Monday morning. And right now we're getting word that barring any last-minute snags, we will indeed have stock trading. The equity markets will resume trading on Monday morning at 9:30. Now again, the tasks to restore trading were monumental in the eyes of many. You have that vast telecom network, the voice and data that hooks up not only the folks down on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange, but folks at other member firms on different locations. So you had to make sure all the bugs were worked out of that. And indeed, the New York Stock Exchange CEO and Chairman Dick Grasso this morning saying that right now all systems are go. They are very, very hopeful that they will indeed have trading on Monday morning. And Grasso said not only is it important to get the equity markets back up and running for the economy and for the overall world equity markets, but also it holds a deep, deep symbolic value here in America.
To send a very important message to the criminals who so heinously attacked this country, that they've lost. The American way of life goes on, business recommences.
And Aaron, at this point, again, barring any last-minute snags, they expect to have stock trading. You'll hear that opening bell for the first time since last Monday.
And they have, I don't know the detail, but I can't imagine they have anything less than something important and symbolic planned for that opening.
It will indeed be something to see. They're going to have the opening bell at 9:30, as tradition has it, and then they'll have 2 minutes of silence, a rendition of God Bless America, and the opening bell will be rung by various political officials as well as representatives of the New York Police Department, Fire Department, Port Authority, and the emergency services units here. So it's expected to be quite an emotional time, as a lot of folks, about 3,000 folks to be exact, file back onto that floor for the first time in about a week or so.
I'm not sure exactly all the reporting you've done, so if I'm about to blindside you, I apologize. Have you talked to any of the traders down there at all? Are they nervous about both the mechanics of Monday and the emotions of traders, professional and otherwise?
Absolutely. In terms of the emotional aspect, it is very close to the Trade Center, and it's a tight-knit community. A lot of folks, new people, no doubt, in the Trade Center, so there'll be a big emotional aspect. As far as the mechanics of the market go, there is some apprehension over just how the system will hold up, as well as what the market's going to do. A lot of folks expect to see a bit of a steep sell-off, at least early on, led by the airline stocks, the insurance stocks, which are especially going to be hard hit. On that note, the SEC has eased some regulations temporarily to help to kind of ease trading and stabilize trading a bit.
What does that mean?
Basically, they'll allow companies, they lifted restrictions temporarily to allow companies to, on the amount of stock they can buy back, or when they can buy it back.
Their own stock.
Exactly.
And that would have the effect of stabilizing the price?
Exactly, restoring confidence to that particular equity. And
you got to understand, you're talking to a guy who barely balances his checkbook, okay? But that would stabilize the price.
Exactly, and again, restore confidence not only to that equity, to that stock in particular, but to the markets in general, in case there is a steep sell-off in some of those individual stocks.
And we know, because we had trading around the world over the course of last week, even though we didn't have it here, that the markets, in fact, have been pretty choppy, but they seem to be stable at the end of the day.
Exactly. They did get off to a rocky start, and a lot of folks believe that the 4-day prolonged shutdown is the longest since 1933. They believe that the last couple of days maybe will serve to stabilize the markets rather than drive them down even lower. But either way, a lot of folks are calling or expecting to see at least a sell-off at the very, very outset of trading.
Yeah, markets hate a lot of things, and instability is right at the top of the list.
Exactly.
Thank you. Nice
Sure.
work. Just came across one quick thing I want to pass along. 20% of all the office space in the city was down there affected by that explosion. 20%. Judy?
Well, Aaron, the building here in Washington, where, of course, all the focus of recovery has been on, of course, is the Pentagon. Workers there continuing, as you know, throughout this day, as they have every day since Tuesday, working on that damaged building, trying to pull whatever out they possibly can. Inside, meantime, the work continues on what officials are signaling will be a strong United States military response. And for the very latest on that, let's turn to CNN's military affairs correspondent, Jamie McIntyre. Jamie.
Well, Judy, Pentagon officials, of course, are not talking in any detail about what military options the Pentagon may be considering in this war against terrorism, although privately Pentagon officials are downplaying any expectations that there could be an immediate response, saying that intelligence needs to be analyzed, that needs to be matched with military options, and that any action will be prudent. Meanwhile, action is fully underway to rebuild one of the nation's most impressive symbols of democracy, and that is, of course, the Pentagon building. Even though the focus is on the people here, the building itself has a strong symbolic value, and the Pentagon announced today that they will rebuild this section of the building as quickly as possible. It may take a couple of years, but they let the first contract today, $145 million for a contractor to begin the work. They're going to need to shore up part of the building and put in new, strip away some of the damage, remove about 350 million pounds of debris in order to demolish some of the sections all the way down to the concrete columns and floor slabs. And they say when they rebuild this, they will be rebuilding space that's equivalent to more than 2 Empire State Buildings. But announcement today that work will get underway. This did hit a part of the building that had just been refurbished using some up-to-date fire-resistant and blast-resistant materials, and they said that went a long way to keeping the death toll down. The death toll now about 125 people in the building plus the 64 on the plane. But again, an announcement today that work will be getting underway very soon, as soon as they've completed the task of recovering all the possible remains, to begin rebuilding the Pentagon and get it occupied again as soon as possible. Judy?
All right, Jamie McIntyre bringing us the latest from the Pentagon. Now, Aaron, back to you.
Thank you. I believe this is going to work now. We're joined from Reno, Nevada, with retired Marine Corps General Martin Bragner. General Bragner is here to talk to us a little bit about some of the challenges that are facing the President, his military planners, and soldiers on the ground as well, as they begin a process of trying to figure out who is responsible for this and what to do about it. General Bragner, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Aaron.
Look, I'm no military mind here, but the first problem seems to me, it's not like we know where the enemy is in a sense. There's not some big army. We can get a satellite picture of them, see them staging and all of that. So one assumes the first thing is, how do you find them?
Well, it's, of course, extremely complex problem, and it's intelligence dependent. I am certain that right now the military planners are looking over all the information they could possibly acquire from a host of sources in order for them to better identify the attackers, where they're located, who is harboring them, who is supporting them. And I'm certain that they're going to discover that, and they already know this, that they are in a wide variety of places, not just one location, and that this kind of an attack was obviously carried out by a host of cells in various parts of the world.
So you're in reducing this to a perhaps too terribly simple way. You're not talking about a shotgun approach where you can go in and drop lots of bombs over a wide area. You really need a kind of a pistol approach where you find a target and go get them.
I think that's right. You know, there's a thought that the President has made clear, and that is that we are going to hold nations responsible for those who harbor and support these terrorists. But to actually get the terrorist cells themselves and break them down and destroy them, it's going to have to be very pinpoint and very accurate, and done in a manner that will ensure that these cells are in fact destroyed, along with the network that supports them. This is not a very short-term project, obviously.
I want to talk about that broader military problem in a second, but let me just, if I can, ask a couple more questions about the more surgical aspect of this. Are there military units, Marine, Army, whatever, that are trained to perform those kinds of actions?
Yes, there are. Both the Army and the Marine Corps have units that are capable of special operations. Highly risky. I suspect that there would be a very significant amount of intelligence gathering done before any kind of an operation like that would be launched. But yes, the capability does exist.
And have we had much success with these sort of operations in the past?
Well, we've had success on limited times that are not very well publicized. Of course, you look back to Desert One, which was a terrible disaster, and that was really the genesis of all these special operations forces.
Just for people who don't remember, Desert One was, if I'm wrong, jump in here, but was the effort to rescue the Iranian hostages, correct?
That's correct. That's correct.
And that was a disaster on the ground.
It was.
Yeah. And then there was the attempt to get Gaddafi a little less than that ago, and that didn't precisely work either, did it?
Well, the end result of that particular effort, however, did come about that Gaddafi has essentially been put out of work and has kind of hunkered down. So I think you can say that that particular effort did result in a desired outcome.
But at best, we've had a mixed record in these kinds of operations. The military is much more comfortable in a more classic battle.
Well, I would say that right now the special operations forces we have are extremely competent. I worked with them. I know how good they are. And I have every confidence that if they were ever called upon to exercise their mission, they would do it in a very professional way. And they did, of course, do a variety of things during the Gulf War, and they were very, very successful at that.
Right, and I wouldn't suggest for a minute that they weren't professional. I merely suggest this is very hard to do well and successfully. It had a lot of risks, a lot of moving parts, and a lot of things that can go wrong.
Oh, absolutely, and that's why I think you'll find that before any kind of an operation of that nature is conducted, that there will be very, very careful planning, a very substantial gathering of intelligence to eliminate as great as possible the margin of error.
We have grown as a country, the United States, used to these air wars where you could keep ground soldiers out of harm's way and you drop some bombs and hope that works. The end result of this is more complicated, isn't it? I mean, if you go after governments, do you see this as simply an air war?
No, I don't. I think one is that you have air power, which is very capable. It's going to be mixed with a variety of other kinds of actions, and I cross the spectrum of economic sanctions, embargoes, forming alliances that will act in concert against these countries, and as well as military action. So it's going to be long range. It's going to be very, very complicated. I think you'll find that the military activities that occur are going to be selective. They'll be very aggressive and probably in some cases massive. But I think you're going to find that it's going to be a longer term, very carefully orchestrated effort on a magnitude that we have not seen before.
Which raises a whole different set of questions which we'll get to in the days ahead. General Bradner, thanks for joining us. Martin Bradner, retired Marine Corps General, joining us this afternoon from Reno, Nevada. Thank you, sir. It's nice to talk to you. To Atlanta, Darren.
Aaron, thank you very much. We're going to keep it on the military theme here and talk about military reservists. As you probably know, President Bush has given the authority to call up as many as 50,000 reserves to active duty, and already many reservists have volunteered to join that effort. So far, apparently there's requirements for 35,000 reservists, including 10,000 from the Army. Turns out our Leon Harris is at Rangers Joe Army and Navy store. That is in front of Fort Benning, Georgia. He has more reaction to Tuesday's attacks and, even more importantly, what lies ahead. Leon, hello.
Hi, Darren. Good to see you. Good, nice to hear your voice. And you're not going to believe that some of the comments that we've been getting from people here, even just moments ago. It's not just the reservists who are getting all fired up right now. We've seen come in here probably 10 disabled ex-veterans, disabled veterans or those who were formerly in the military. And do you know what they've been telling us to a man? That they would give up their 100% disabilities to get back in, to get a chance to go over and do something. That kind of sentiment is really coming up to the surface around here. We're standing in front of a place at Ranger Joe's, which is a really unusual place. They've got pretty much anything that you could imagine buying that's related to the military. We've seen civilians and enlisted men alike coming in here, men and women, I should say, coming in here and buying things from, we've seen gas masks being sold, we've seen you name it, they've been looking for mirrors to search under vehicles. We've seen all kinds of gun paraphernalia, uniforms. But you know what the hottest selling commodity here today was? United States flags, the stars and bars. They came in here this morning, and people were here lined up around 8:30 this morning trying to buy some. The place was sold out. They didn't even open up until 9. They said the first shipment they would get in, and maybe the only one they'd get in, would be around 1 o'clock. You know what happened? The place was jam-packed. It took the driver 8 hours to make the run into Alabama to get the flags, and when they came back in, they were gone in 90 seconds. We sat here and counted it. It was an unbelievable scene. But you know what? While we were sitting here listening to the hubbub there as people were scrambling, and very politely so, over those flags, it seemed as though we detected a shift in the sentiment that people were expressing. They've gone from handling their grief to trying to get ready to dish some out on their own.
Well, it's, I think, our biggest chance to prove what we really got, you know, give them all we can. And I think payback's in order, and they're going to pay.
They've got haircuts they're giving here in the back while guys are getting their uniforms pressed. But right next door is Tattoo Tommy's, and we counted more than a handful of guys who've gone in there feeling that now is the time to express their patriotism by getting tattoos. We've seen eagles and flags and you name it, and there's been no shortage of guys going in there who have personal connections to the tragedies in Washington and in New York. And on a final note, you know what else I just learned they have been selling out of today, in addition to the flags? The little black bands that officers have been wearing in honor to commemorate those of their comrades who have fallen in this tragedy. They are all sold out of those as well, sad to say. Darren, back to you.
Leon, on the equipment that people are buying, is it because they're just trying to get in the spirit, or you think they're really getting ready because you think that they're soldiers who are ready to head out?
Well, you know what? The soldiers have been instructed to not talk to us. And it's not because they've got a problem with CNN or anything specifically. It's because they don't want to give away anything. They don't want to give away just how prepared they really are. But off the record, off camera, they've all told us that they are really taking this very, very seriously, and they're going through every step. They want to make sure that they've got every single thing that they need down to the last item, and that's why we've seen, I mean, this parking lot, as you can probably see over here, you may not be able to see, has been jam-packed all day from guys coming in and girding themselves up and getting ready for whatever is to come.
Understandable. Leon Harris at Fort Benning, Georgia. Leon, thank you. And now we go back up to Washington, D.C. and Judy.
Well, Darren, air travel is something we're all watching. Slowly, it is returning to normal across the country. Boston's Logan International Airport reopened today. That's the first time since Tuesday's attack. And, of course, that was where 2 of the 4 flights that were hijacked originated from. This morning, this very morning, a man was pulled off of a flight at Logan that was headed to Atlanta. And he was, it was described, he was engaging in suspicious and rowdy behavior. Now, all 3 of New York City's major airports are now open, but under tighter security. Out in Los Angeles, at International Airport there, expects to be running at 25% capacity, they tell us today. That would be the equivalent of about 500 flights. Here in Washington, our Washington Reagan Airport is the only airport in the country that remains completely closed. Some activity out there right now. For that, let's go to Kathleen Koch. Kathleen, what's going on?
Well, Judy, the Department of Transportation made a decision late this afternoon to begin to allow those aircraft that were stranded here Tuesday to get back into circulation. So at 4 p.m., they opened this airport for flight crews only to board the 42 commercial aircraft, the 12 air taxis, and the 70 general aviation aircraft that were stuck here. Allow the flight crews to begin boarding those aircraft and getting them up into the air. So between 4 and 7 this evening, this airport is open for those flights to go out. Also between 10 and 4 tomorrow and Monday. An interesting note, Judy, though, we are not seeing any of these aircraft take off to the north toward the city. Of course, this airport is just across the Potomac River from Washington, D.C., and that is one of the reasons that the Federal Aviation Administration has temporarily closed it down, temporarily and indefinitely, because with aircraft taking off and landing here at speeds of 140 to 150 miles an hour, pilots tell us that in less than in a minute, one of these aircraft could veer off into the White House, the Pentagon, and there would be little that anyone could do about it. Judy?
All right, Kathleen Koch bringing us up to date on the very latest at Reagan National here in Washington. Thanks, Kathleen. And now to Aaron in New York.
Thank you, Judy. One of the great joys of flying in and out of Washington is flying out of National and seeing the Capitol. It's a I don't suppose any of us will look at that quite the same again. Just as we're learning more about the people who hijacked the plane and their lives and what they had been up to the last several years, we're also learning more about the passengers who were on those planes and their lives. In this case, a story about someone on board American Airlines Flight 11, which crashed into the World Trade Center on Tuesday. Here's CNN correspondent Ann McDermott.
This is supposed to be such a happy time for Kelly Lee. She's just had a baby, her second little girl. But just 2 days before the birth of Allison Danielle, Kelly's husband Dan was killed. He was on board American Airlines Flight 11 on Tuesday morning.
This doesn't seem possible or believable yet to me, so I just keep expecting him to come back or walk in the door and be here at some point.
Dan was a stage carpenter for the Backstreet Boys and left the tour in Boston to come home for the birth of his baby.
He called at 2 a.m. that morning, his time in Boston, and he just said, you know, he'd be home soon and he loved us.
Later that morning, when Kelly saw that all hell was breaking loose in Manhattan, she called her family. She called Dan's friends.
Because we kept hoping Tuesday that he'd missed his flight. He overslept her because he'd only had like 3 hours sleep before the flight. And they said all he could talk about was how happy he was to come home. So they knew he'd be on it.
And he was. And now his oldest daughter keeps breaking Kelly's heart over and over again. She's been told her daddy is dead, but she doesn't know what that means.
She keeps telling me he'll be back in 5 minutes. She's asked to call